I was never meant to live this long. That's the first thing you should know before I tell you why my quilts look the way they do, why every stitch is tight enough to choke a secret, why every pattern is a map of the things I've tried so hard to bury. People think old age makes you forget. For me, old age became a punishment because it made me remember. My name is Mae Caldwell. I'm 78 years old, and I live in a creaking yellow house on 85th Street in Cleveland, Ohio, the same house that holds the crime I helped hide when I was 23. Most of the family thinks I'm slipping. They think I sit in my dim sewing room all day because I'm lonely or confused or halfway senile. They don't know I sew because I'm terrified of what will happen if I stop. Because if my hands go still, my mind starts talking. And what it says could ruin us all. The sewing room wasn't always dim, it just feels that way now. The single window is small, cloudy from age, and faces the garage. So the light that spills in is thin and gray. I've worked in this room for decades. The walls smell like cotton, cedar, and old ghosts. On the table sits my Singer machine, older than my children, older than the marriage I outlived, older than the lie this house was built on. This morning started like all the others. I threaded the needle with trembling fingers, careful not to prick myself the way I sometimes do when my hands shake too much. But today felt different. The air was heavy, like the room could sense what was coming. The quilt on my lap was white, plain white, clean, untouched. A perfect canvas for a warning. I was stitching a pattern I knew by heart, even though I had never once spoken it out loud. A grid of straight lines, tight angles, and repeating shapes anyone else would think it was just decorative geometry. But I know maps when I see them. I lived them. I drew them in chalk on backroom tables. I memorized them in the dark, whispering routes and safe paths, while fear gnawed at my spine. They thought we were just a neighborhood watch. That's what the newspapers called us back then. A group of church-going women watching the streets, keeping kids safe, guarding the community. But we weren't watching for petty thieves or late-night drunks. We were watching men who buried things. Important things. Illegal things. People. My needle paused in midair as I felt it again, that cold twist in my stomach. The kind that comes before a memory forces its way to the front of my mind. I didn't hear my granddaughter's footsteps until she was already at the door. Nia always moved softly, like her mother had taught her to respect people's spaces, but also like a girl who had learned to tiptoe around sadness. "Grandma?" she asked gently. "You okay?" I didn't look up. I never look up when I'm sewing. If she saw my eyes during moments like these, she'd see too much. "Yes, baby. I'm fine." But the truth was pulsing in my fingertips. The same truth that had haunted me for 55 years. On the quilt, my stitches formed the outline of our neighborhood. 2 blocks over, I stitched X, a place no one had visited in decades. But beneath my house, right beneath my own floor, was the place I had never marked. The place I had sworn to take to my grave. But Nia, she was smart. Too smart. The kind of smart that made people curious. And curiosity was the biggest danger of all. She stepped closer, studying the quilt, her eyebrows pressed together in confusion. "Grandma, this looks like a pattern I cut in. Too quickly." She frowned. And that was the moment, the exact second, I knew I was losing control of the story I'd kept hidden for more than half a century. Nia was about to find the truth in my stitches. And once she did, there would be no stopping what came next. Nia didn't move at first. She just stood there, staring, down at the quilt spread across my lap like it was whispering to her. Her eyebrows pinched, her mouth tightened, and I knew she was tracing the lines, trying to make sense of the shapes. She'd always been good at that, shapes, puzzles, codes. When she was 6, she solved a 1,000-piece jigsaw in a single afternoon and asked if I had anything more challenging. She was 11 now, old enough to notice things, old enough to understand danger, but young enough to think she could outrun it. "Grandma," she said slowly, "this looks like our street." My throat closed. I kept sewing, pretending I didn't hear it right. "What street you talking about, baby?" She pointed, a small finger hovering over a clean, sharp, stitched rectangle, the block where our house sat. This one. And this curve. This looks like Clover Lane. And this little square. That's the gas station, right? My hands stilled. Nia wasn't guessing. She was recognizing. My voice came out. Thin, a breath more than a word. You know maps now, do you? She shrugged, proud but shy. Daddy showed me how to read GPS grids. And in social studies, we learned about old neighborhood layouts. I felt a ripple of fear. Not panic, panic is loud. This was something quieter, colder. A creeping sense that the past was lifting its head like an animal waking. I pulled the quilt closer to my chest. This is just a design, don't overthink it. But Nia didn't back away. Grandma, what's the X for? The needle slipped. Mi finger yakil. A sharp sting bloomed a pinprick. Small but bright, and a drop of blood slid onto the white fabric like a confession. Her eyes widened. You're bleeding! Wait, don't move. It's fine, I snapped, more harshly than I meant. Her face fell. I softened. I'm sorry, sugar. I'm just tired. She didn't believe me, but she didn't argue either. Kids today don't talk back the way we used to. They talk around you, collecting pieces of truth for later. And Nia was collecting right now. She looked again at the quilt. Grandma, why are all your quilts like this? With lines and shapes? Mom says they look like, patterns of something. Your mama talks too much, I muttered, folding the edge of the fabric to hide the blood. She sat on the old footstool by the dresser. Watching me like I was a TV show, she finally understood. You make quilts every day, she said. But we don't use them. They stay in here. You don't even sell them. So, what are they for? I swallowed. The room felt smaller than usual, the air thicker. They're for remembering, I said quietly. Remembering what? There it was, the question I'd avoided for 55 years. I looked at her then. Really looked. Her big brown eyes, her braided hair, her hopeful face. Innocent, curious, too close to danger. I forced a smile. Run along now, Grandma's got to finish before the light goes. But she didn't move. Instead, she reached under the sewing table and pulled out the quilt she wasn't supposed to touch. The oldest one, the one with the stitched compass, rose in the corner. The one with 3 marked X's. She unfolded it slowly, carefully, like she knew she was trespassing on something sacred. Grandma, this one shows the basement. My heart stopped, truly stopped, and that was when I knew the secret was waking again. The past wasn't done with me, and now it had found Nia. I hadn't heard anyone speak about the basement in years. Not my children, not my late husband, not the neighbors who once whispered about it behind cupped hands. But hearing it from Nia's mouth, soft, innocent, unafraid, felt like someone had dragged a cold nail down my spine. She held the old quilt up to the dim light of the sewing room window. Its edges were frayed, its colors faded, but the shapes were still unmistakable. Lines running beneath our house like veins. Symbols marking points I had prayed no one would ever decode. How do you know that's the basement? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She pointed at the stitched rectangle in the lower corner. Because this shape looks like our staircase. And this little square? That's where the storage shelf is. And this box? She paused, tapping the largest stitch section. That's the back wall we never touch. Right? My breath caught. Not because she was wrong, she wasn't. But because she was seeing what I had hidden in plain sight. You can bury a secret deep, but a smart child will always sense the bump in the dirt. I forced a smile. Some houses share the same layout. You can't assume. But Grandma, she whispered, your stitches match the cracks on our cement. I froze. She wasn't just curious anymore. She was connecting things, too many things. Who showed you the basement, Nia? She hesitated. Kids hesitate only when they know they're about to betray someone. Mom did, she admitted finally. Last Saturday. She said the freezer was empty, and she needed help bringing up the spare one. I closed my eyes. That freezer. That stupid, humming freezer sitting right on top of the place I had promised myself never to look at again. When I didn't respond, Nia scooted closer. Grandma, why don't you like going down there? Mom says you never stepped foot in the basement. She said you haven't since before she was born. "Ah, I muttered. "Your mama should mind her business." But Nia wasn't fooled. "Grandma," she whispered, "what happened in the basement?" And there it was. The question I deserved. The question I feared. The question the universe had apparently decided I could no longer outrun. I looked at her, my granddaughter, my blood, and I saw the same fierce curiosity her mother once had. The same fire that had burned my sister, Clara. Clara? Oh, Lord, Clara. My hands shook so hard I had to set the quilt aside. The room dimmed darker than the clouds outside. A memory rose up, sharp and relentless. Clara's voice in the back room of Miss Lottie's laundromat, whispering, "May, they're not just watching the streets. They're hiding something big under a house on 85th. I pressed a hand to my chest as the memory flooded in. The night we followed the men. The sound of shovels clanging against stone. The muffled grunts. The lantern light flickering. Across the ground. The half-open metal box. The glimpse of what was inside. The realization of what they had done. And the moment one of them turned and saw us watching, I trembled. Nia noticed. She placed a small, warm hand over mine. Her voice softened into something almost heartbreakingly gentle. "Grandma, you can tell me." And I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But secrets this old don't leave quietly. They tear their way out. They take pieces of you as they go. I tried to breathe. The sewing room walls felt like they were leaning inward. "Nia," I whispered hoarsely, "that basement is not a place for you. You hear me? You stay away from it. I don't care what your mama says." "Why? What's down there?" I looked at the quilt, the old one, the forbidden one, and my eyes drifted to the stitched X beneath the largest rectangle. The place behind the wall. The place sealed before my children were born. The place Clara never walked away from. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "Because," I said, "some secrets should stay buried." "But you stitched it," Nia countered softly. "You stitched the whole map. If it really needs to stay buried, then why did you make a quilt about it?" The honest answer hovered on my tongue. "Because the dead don't like silence, child. And sometimes they demand to be remembered. But instead," I said, "because I needed to remember where not to look." She watched me carefully, her eyes searching, measuring. And I knew she wouldn't let it go. The past had grabbed hold of me again. And now it had Nia by the sleeve. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the pain in my fingers or the ache in my back, those I'm used to. I didn't sleep because Nia's questions had cracked open a door in my mind I had spent 55 years nailing shut. The quilts were supposed to be my quiet burden, my silent way of remembering without speaking. But now, someone else had seen the map. Someone young. Someone curious. Someone who could get hurt. I lay awake until the sky outside turned from velvet to gray. By dawn, I finally gave up on pretending to rest and shuffled to the kitchen. Coffee hissed in the pot, filling the air with a smell sharp enough to wake the dead if they weren't already awake in my head. The house creaked as I moved, every groan of the floorboards a reminder of what lay beneath them. I didn't hear Nia until her soft voice floated from behind me. "Grandma, you didn't answer my questions." I turned slowly. She was still in her pajamas, braided hair frizzy from sleep, but her eyes were bright, alert, watching me the way her mother used to watch trouble brewing. I sighed and sat at the table. Some answers are dangerous, sugar. She didn't blink. So is not knowing. Lord, help me, this child was just like Clara. Bold, stubborn. The kind of stubborn that uncovers things people want to stay buried. "Come sit," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. She slid onto it, folding her hands in her lap. I looked at her for a long moment before beginning. "You ever heard of the East End watchwomen?" She shook her head. "Course not," I muttered. "It wasn't in no history books. They made sure of that." "Who's they?" she asked. I ignored the question for now. "In 1968, I said. "Our neighborhood was different. Trouble ran up and down these streets like water. Men disappearing. Kids being taken advantage of. Houses being used for things no decent person should see." Nia swallowed. "Bad things?" "Worse than bad," I said. Evil. Her eyes flickered. And people tried to report it, I continued. But the men doing the evil, they had connections, friends in places higher than the police. They controlled everything. So a group of women got together, quiet-like, determined to watch, protect, and keep evidence in case one blessed day we could expose the truth. Were you part of them? She whispered. Yes, I admitted. Me, your great-aunt Clara, Miss Lottie from the laundromat, a handful of others. She leaned in. What did you do? We didn't fight. We didn't confront nobody. We didn't have weapons or badges. We had eyes. And we watched everything. I paused, tasting old fear on my tongue. And one night I said, we watched something we weren't supposed to. The kitchen faded. Away as the memory took me like a tide. 1968. A cold November night. Claire and I followed the men from Jefferson Avenue to this very house before it was ever mine. The basement then was unfinished. Dirt and stone. The air cold and damp. The men were digging, laughing, sweating. We hid behind a stack of lumber, hearts pounding. I can still hear Clara's whisper, Mae, that's a metal box. And it was. Big, heavy, dragged across the floor, screeching like a dying animal. They opened it, just enough for lantern light to spill inside. I didn't mean to look, truly, but my eyes shifted on their own. Inside that box was. I stopped speaking. Nia waited, breath held. Grandma, what was it? I opened my mouth, but the answer wouldn't come. The words sat in my throat like stones. Instead I said, something no child should ever have to hear about. She swallowed hard. And then what happened? They saw us, I whispered. One of the men turned, and in that second everything changed. My hand shook. Coffee rattled in my cup. My, Clara hissed, run. We ran, feet slipping on dirt, breath tearing our lungs open, the men shouting behind us. We made it to the street, barely, alive, but not safe. And the next morning, Clara was gone. Nia gasped softly. Gone? She whispered. What do you mean? They said she ran away. But Clara didn't run from nothing in her life. She only ran toward things. My voice tightened. She didn't come home. She wasn't reported missing. Her name was never in no newspaper. And no one looked for her except me. Nia trembled. You think the men took her? I don't think, I whispered. I know. Her eyes filled with tears. Grandma, is that why you've been stitching all these patterns? So you don't forget what happened to her? No, sugar, I said softly. Her eyes widened. Then why? I leaned forward, lowering my voice until it was barely a breath. Because I think Clara is still in this house. Nia froze. Where? I pointed downward. To this very day, I whispered. I believe she's behind that basement wall the men sealed that night. Nia's breath hitched. And the quilt, she whispered slowly, shows the exact spot. I nodded. She looked terrified, but she also looked determined. Grandma? She whispered. Yes. When are we going down there? I stared at Nia, unsure whether to scold her, pray for her, or hold her so tight she'd forget the basement even existed. When are we going down there? Her question hung in the air like the echo of a crime. No, I said quickly. We ain't going anywhere near that basement. But Grandma, I said no. She closed her mouth, but her eyes stayed stubborn. And that scared me more than the basement ever had. I pushed back from the table, grabbed the dish towel, wiped my trembling palms. I needed air. I needed space. I needed 50 years of distance from all this. But life doesn't offer refunds on the past. Nia, listen to me, I said. Some things are buried for a reason, you understand? No, she said honestly. I don't. Of course she didn't. She was a child, smart, yes, but untouched by the kind of fear that sinks claws into your ribs and never lets go. I opened my mouth to try again, but before I could speak, her mother's voice drifted from the hallway. Ma, Nia, what are y'all doing up so early? My daughter, Angela, walked into the kitchen with her phone in one hand and exhaustion painted under her eyes. She worked night shifts at the hospital, tired was her normal. But today, she looked more frayed than usual. "You two okay?" she asked. Nia stiffened. I knew that look, she had a secret now. A secret she wasn't sure she should keep. "We're fine," I said quickly. "Just talking about old stories." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Old stories? You don't tell those often." "Some stories ain't worth retelling," I muttered. She laughed softly. "You've said that my whole life." Because it had been true my whole life. Angela poured herself coffee, then turned to me. "Ma, I'm gonna need your help tonight with picking up Nia from choir practice. I'm on double shift again." I nodded. "I'll be there." Nia wiped her eyes as quietly as she could. Angela didn't notice being exhausted blinds you in ways you don't even realize. "And Ma?" Angela added, "Please don't fill her head with that creepy basement nonsense again. She already gets nervous down there when the lights flicker." My blood went cold. "Again?" I repeated. "What you mean again?" "Oh," Angela said casually. "She mentioned to me once that your house feels weird sometimes. Drafty, like there's someone walking around down there. Kids have imaginations, Ma." Nia's eyes met mine across the table. And in that moment, we both knew she hadn't imagined it. Something was moving down there. Something breathing inside secrets older than she was. Angela kissed the top of Nia's head and walked toward the hallway. "Mom," Nia called before thinking. Angela paused. "Yeah, baby? Can I ask you something? About the basement?" I shot Nia a look sharp enough to cut thread. Angela sighed. "Oh Lord, here we go again." She placed a hand on her hip. "Y'all need to stop making the basement sound like it's haunted. It's just old. Houses creak, pipes moan. It's normal." "Nothing normal about the East End," I muttered under my breath. Angela frowned. "Ma? What was that?" "Nothing." I forced a smile. "Just ramblin'." She shrugged and walked away, disappearing into her room. The moment she was out of earshot, Nia leaned close. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom thinks the noises are just pipes. But you know they're not, don't you?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Nia," I said quietly, "I know the difference between pipes and the sound of something trying to be heard." She swallowed. "So, you think someone's behind the wall, like, trapped?" My voice cracked. "Not from age. From memory. I think," I said, "that the past never stayed buried. Not fully, and it wants to be found." Nia's face tightened with a mix of fear and resolve. "Then we have to go down there." I shook my head. "No, it's too dangerous." "But Grandma," "No." My voice shook the table. Nia blinked, surprised. I rarely raised my voice. Age softens your volume, even if it doesn't soften your pain. She whispered, "But what if Clara is down there?" Her words pierced me like needles. I turned away, breathing slow and deep. "You let Clara rest," I said. "Let the dead be." Nia frowned. "But what if she's not?" I stood and gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Nia," I said, "I ain't setting foot in that basement again. Ever." She looked hurt, but she also looked determined. And determination is how trouble begins. That night, after Angela left for her shift and the house settled into its usual creaks, I thought I heard movement downstairs. Soft, dragging. A shuffle against cement. I held my breath. The sound came again. Nia appeared in my bedroom doorway, her silhouette shaking. "Grandma," she whispered, "there's someone down there." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her small hand found mine. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "come with me." And I knew, whether I wanted to or not, the past had opened its door, and Nia had already stepped toward it. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not nighttime quiet, but the kind of quiet that feels listening, like the walls are holding their breath. Nia's hand tightened around mine as we stood in the dim hallway, staring at the black mouth of the basement door. The bulb overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied. "Grandma," she whispered. I should have told her to go to bed. I should have shut the door, locked it, pushed a dresser in front of it. But something in the deep of me, something old, bruised, and unfinished, rose up and said, "It's time." I swallowed the fear burning in my throat and reached for the basement light switch. It buzzed weakly. A tired yellow glow spread down the stairs like it was afraid to go first. Step by step, we descended. Each creak of the stairs was a memory. Each breath was a ghost leaning close. Halfway down, Nia whispered, "Grandma, what if someone's hiding? Then we stay behind me," I murmured. But the truth was harsher. If someone was hiding, I couldn't protect her. My knees ached. My heart was old and tired. And fear ages you faster than years ever could. We reached the bottom. The basement looked the same as always. Cold cement, old freezer humming, shelves with canned peaches and jars of beans nobody ate anymore. But something felt wrong. Like the air had weight. I scanned the room. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Yet I could feel something watching. "Grandma," Nia whispered, pointing. "Look." Her finger trembled toward the far wall, the sealed one. The one stitched into the quilt. A thin line of dust lay across the floor, except for one spot. A long, dragging mark interrupted the dust. Fresh. Like something had been pulled. Or someone. My breath caught. "That wasn't there yesterday," Nia whispered. I stepped closer. My hands shook, but not from age. When I was an East End watchwoman, fear had direction. Fear had names. Now it just sat inside me like an echo of old crimes. I pressed my palm to the cement wall. Cold. Dead cold. But behind it, a warmth. A pressure. Like something living waited on the other side. Nia leaned in beside me. "Grandma, what happened the night Clara disappeared?" "You?" said they sealed something. I kept my eyes on the wall. "They sealed this," I said, "after they dragged the metal box inside." "What was in the box?" she whispered. I opened my mouth, but a sharp sound cut through the basement. Tap. We both froze. Another tap. Light. From behind the wall. "Grandma," Nia whispered, voice cracking. "Somebody's in there." My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my teeth. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible. The men, they left nothing alive." But then it came again. Tap. Tap. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone trying to get attention. My breath fogged in front of me. "Is it Clara?" Nia asked. I wanted to say yes. Lord knows I wanted that more than anything. But the truth weighed heavier. "It ain't Clara," I whispered. "She'd been gone too long." Nia blinked up at me. "Then who?" Footsteps. Soft. Behind us. We spun around. Nothing there. But I swear I felt a breeze pass by, even though no windows were open. Nia's voice cracked. "Grandma, can we go back upstairs?" Not yet. Because now I saw it. A small crack near the floor of the sealed wall. A hairline fracture. Barely visible. It hadn't been there when I was younger. Someone had been pushing from the inside. Or the wall was finally giving way. I knelt down, joints screaming, and ran my fingers over the crack. Warm air seeped through it. Warm. Basements ain't warm behind. Concrete. Something shifted behind the wall. A rustle. A scrape. Nia gripped my shoulder. "Grandma, we need to call the police." I shook my head. "No." "Why not?" "'Cause the people who built this wall had friends wearing badges. And some of those friends still have grandsons wearing badges today." Her face drained. A sound rose from behind the concrete. A low, dragging moan. Not human. Not animal. Something in between. Nia whimpered. "Grandma, what is that?" I looked at the wall. The Quilts map burned in my mind. "The men buried more than evidence," I whispered. "More than Clara." The moan came again. Closer. They buried their sin. The freezer beside us rattled. The lights flickered violently. Dust rained down from the beams. "Grandma," Nia sobbed. I stood, pulling her behind me. "Stay back," I ordered. Because I knew things the modern world had forgotten. When evil goes unpunished long enough, it changes shape. It learns how to wait, how to hide, how to listen. The wall rumbled. Hairline cracks crawled upward like veins. Mia screamed. And in that moment, I knew the wall wasn't just holding a secret. It was holding something alive enough to want out. I stood at the edge of the basement hole, staring at the metal box like it was a live animal. My breath fogged in the cold air, and my gloves were coated with dirt and pieces of broken cement. Everything in me screamed to stop, to put the box back, to walk away, to pretend Auntie Mae had never stitched those warnings into her quilts. But I had come too far. I climbed into the hole, boots crunching on the loose gravel. The metal box was heavier than it looked, the lid sealed shut by time and rust. My hands trembled as I lifted it. For a second, I thought I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, dragging, like someone moving carefully so they wouldn't be heard. I froze. Silence. Just the hum of the old refrigerator upstairs and my own heartbeat ricocheting inside my ribcage. I climbed out with the box and set it on the dusty basement floor. The hinges groaned when I pried them open. The sound alone made my blood run cold. Inside, wrapped in yellowing wax paper, were documents, files, a small black notebook, a folded map, and on top of everything else, a tarnished police badge. My stomach dropped so fast, I felt nauseous. Before I could process what I was looking at, footsteps sounded on the basement stairs, this time clear, intentional. I snapped the lid shut. "Emily," my dad called down, his voice tense. "What are you doing?" I swallowed hard. He sounded off. Not angry. Not curious. Afraid. I stepped back from the box. I found something. Under the concrete. Dad came down the steps slowly, gripping the railing like the wood itself might bite him. His eyes found the metal box, and I saw something I had never seen on my father's face. Pure dread. He knelt, his palms resting on his thighs, staring at the box like it was a ghost. "I knew this day would come," he whispered. My heart jumped. "You? Knew? About the quilts? About the symbols?" Dad shook his head. "Not all of it. Just enough to know your grandma wasn't crazy." His voice cracked. "I told them not to seal the basement. I told them the truth always finds a way out." He opened the box with shaky hands and lifted the old badge. His fingers brushed over the engraved number. "It belonged to your grandfather," he murmured. I blinked. "Grandpa James? But he wasn't, he wasn't a cop." Dad exhaled hard. "He was. Before he disappeared." My world tilted. "Dad, what is all this?" He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he lifted the little black notebook. Pages stuffed with names, dates, coded notes, and one phrase repeated over and over. "Not safe." He closed the notebook and turned to me, eyes shining with fear. "Your grandma wasn't sewing warnings for strangers," he whispered. "She was sewing them for us." I took a step back. "Dad, you're scaring me." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Because you need to be scared. Because whoever buried this, whoever covered up what happened to your grandfather, never wanted it found." A chill ran down my spine. "Who?" He hesitated. Then a shadow flickered at the top of the stairs. My dad froze. Someone else was in the house. He mouthed, "Don't move." But the stairwell light flicked off, click, plunging the basement into near darkness. My father let out a breath that sounded more like a prayer. "Them," he whispered. For a moment, the basement swallowed every sound except my breathing. The air felt thick, too thick, like the whole house was holding its breath with me. I could barely see my dad's outline in the dark, only the faint reflection of the metal box on the floor. Someone was upstairs. Someone who turned the lights off on purpose. My dad moved closer, voice barely a whisper. "Emily, listen to me. Do not make a sound." A floorboard creaked above us, slow, deliberate, like someone pressing their weight on it just to test if we would react. I covered my mouth with both hands. Dad lifted a finger, signaling me to stay where I was. Then he tiptoed toward the stairs. I watched his outline pause at the bottom step. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to memorize the pattern of footsteps above. He mouthed, "There are two." My nails dug into my palms. Whoever was up there, they weren't thieves. They weren't curious neighbors. They were looking for something. Or someone. Another slow step above us. And another. Coming closer to the basement door. My dad turned back to me, panic flashing across his face. I whispered, "What do we do?" "They came for the box," he said shakily. "They know someone dug it up." I swallowed hard. This house is old. How would they even know? He gave a bitter smile in the dark. Because the people who buried secrets don't sleep well. They keep watch. A soft click echoed from upstairs, the unmistakable sound of the basement doorknob turning. I froze. Dad grabbed my wrist. "We're going out the storm doors, now." I glanced toward the old metal storm doors at the far end of the basement. They hadn't been opened in years, maybe decades. Rust covered them like scabs. "They'll make noise," I whispered. He squeezed my wrist. "So will dying." The basement door above cracked open. A sliver of faint hallway light slid into the darkness. I heard a voice whisper low, male, tense. "She's down there. Keep your light off." Dad pulled me across the basement as quietly as he could, but it felt like every step echoed like thunder. The first intruder began descending the stairs. One slow step, then another. I wanted to scream. My heart was beating so loud I was sure they could hear it. Dad reached the storm doors and pushed. They didn't budge. He tried again, harder. The hinges groaned softly. The flashlight beam suddenly clicked on at the stair, landing sharp, bright, slicing through the dark. Dad froze. The man on the stairs said calmly, "Don't run. We just need the box." "Emily," Dad whispered. "Go." He shoved the storm doors with both hands, using all his strength. They burst open with an ear-splitting metallic shriek. Light swept across the basement, the intruder's boots hitting the bottom step as he lunged forward. Dad grabbed the metal box and shoved it into my chest. "Take it. Don't look back. Dad. Go." I scrambled up through the storm doors as cold night air hit my face. The wind felt like freedom, sharp, desperate. Behind me, I heard a struggle. A thud. A grunt. A shout. Then my father yelling, "Run, Emily!" I ran, barefoot, dirt in my mouth, the box heavy against my ribs. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's fence. I crouched behind a bush, chest heaving, my mind spiraling. A distant slam echoed from my house. Then I saw two figures exit the back door. Not rushing. Not panicked. Controlled. Organized. Professionals. One of them carried something over his shoulder. My vision blurred. It was my dad. The second man lifted his phone and said clearly into it, "We've got him. The girl has the box." A pause. He listened, then nodded. Understood. He hung up. They turned toward a black SUV parked in the shadows. The kind with tinted windows. The kind that doesn't have a license plate you can read. I clutched the metal box to my chest, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. Whoever these men were, they weren't just covering up a crime from decades ago. They were still cleaning up today. And now they had my father. I looked down at the box, at my grandmother's map, at my grandfather's badge, at the notebook that said, "Not safe." It hit me then with terrifying clarity. My grandmother hadn't been warning the family about the past. She'd been warning us about the future, about the people still watching, the people who had just taken my dad. I swallowed the tightness in my throat and whispered into the cold night, "I'm coming for you." I ran until my legs felt like rubber bands ready to snap. My lungs burned, my throat tasted like metal, but I didn't stop until I reached the far end of our block, past Mrs. Hill's giant oak tree, past the empty playground, past the row of streetlights flickering like they were warning me to. Only when I reached the shadows behind the community church did I finally collapse to my knees, clutching the metal box like it contained oxygen. My dad was gone. Taken. Because of me? No, because of whatever secrets Grandpa James left buried under our house, and whatever quilted messages Auntie Mae had spent decades trying to sew into safety. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, like maybe the box had answers. But all I heard was the echo of my dad's last words. "Run, Emily!" A sob clawed at my throat, but I swallowed it down. Crying wouldn't help. thinking would. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, in. Then I opened the box again. The files were old, yellowing, but neatly organized. Some were stamped City, Records, others Property Survey, and one had the faded seal of the Maplewood Police Department, the same town our family had lived in for generations. But it was the map that pulled my attention. I unfolded it carefully. It was a hand-drawn street layout of our neighborhood from the 1970s. My house was marked with a red X. But not just mine. There were 8 X's, all grouped in a curved shape. I squinted. The shape looked familiar. Do familiar. I dug through the wax, paper, until I found one of Auntie Mae's quilts, the one she kept folded on the top shelf, the one everyone thought she never finished. But she had finished it. In her own way, the quilt was covered in abstract geometric shapes, triangles, diamonds, loops, zigzags, patterns that looked meaningless until I placed the quilt beside the map. My stomach dropped. The X's matched the quilt. Grandma wasn't sewing designs. She was sewing locations. 8 houses. 8 secrets. 8 warnings. My hands shook wildly now. I flipped the notebook open to the first page. Everything started with House #3. I scanned the map. House #3 was only 4 blocks from where I sat. Then I heard something distant at first, then clearer. An engine, a car door, voices. Panic stabbed through me. I snapped the notebook shut and pressed myself against the back of the church wall. A black SUV rolled slowly down the street, the same type I had seen outside my house. Its headlights scanned the road, like eyes. They were searching for me. I held my breath as it passed the church, moving creepily slow, like it could smell fear in the air. Even after it turned the corner, I didn't move for several seconds. When I finally exhaled, my breath came out shaky. I needed to disappear. I needed time. I needed help. And I knew the only place they wouldn't look for me right away. House #3. If Grandma and Grandpa encoded their secrets into quilts and buried maps, and if House #3 was the beginning of whatever they were trying to stop, then that house held answers. Maybe answers that could save my dad. I tucked everything back into the box and hugged it tight to my chest. Okay, I whispered into the cold night. Grandma, I'm listening now. I slipped through the churchyard, keeping low, moving from shadow to shadow, like Grandpa must have taught Dad long ago. When I finally reached the quiet cul-de-sac where House #3 sat, I stopped dead in the street, because staring right at me was the same symbol from Grandma's quilt, painted, faded, but still visible on the mailbox. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a symbol. It was a signal, a message, or worse, a warning meant for someone who was long gone, and I had just walked straight into it. House #3 looked abandoned from the street, quiet, dark, the kind of house kids dare each other to approach on Halloween. But up close, it wasn't abandoned at all. The grass was trimmed. The porch light wasn't dead, it was intentionally unscrewed. The curtains were closed, but not dusty. And the mailbox with the faded quilt symbol, perfectly empty. Someone lived here, or at least visited often. I tucked the metal box under my arm and approached the porch slowly, listening for any sound breathing, footsteps, anything. The night wind rustled the tree branches overhead, and a loose shutter clapped lightly against the siding. I hesitated on the first step. Grandma Mae had marked this house for a reason. Grandpa James had written, "Everything started with House #3. And the men who took my dad didn't come from some random crime. They came from a system, a network, a history. My history. I raised my hand and knocked. 1 second. 2 seconds. Silence. Then, a soft shuffle behind the door. My pulse spiked. I stepped back, ready to run, when the deadbolt slid open. The door cracked just an inch, revealing a sliver of yellow light and an eye peering out at me. A woman's voice whispered, "Who are you?" I swallowed. "My name is Emily. Emily Jameson. My grandmother was Mae Lattimore." Silence. Then the door opened wider. A woman in her late 70s stood there, her silver hair tied in a neat braid, her eyes sharp despite the obvious exhaustion etched into her face. You look like her, she murmured, stepping aside. Come in, quickly. I slipped inside, and she immediately bolted the door behind us. 2 locks, a chain, and a wooden wedge. She slid across the floor. Sit, she said, motioning toward an old but clean sofa. Tell me why you're here. I held the metal box in my lap like a shield. My grandmother left me clues. In her quilts. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Those weren't clues, child. Those were lifelines. For whoever in your family would finally be brave enough to follow them. I stared. You knew? She nodded. We all did. We? She lowered herself into a rocking chair across from me. There were 8 households. 8 families. We were part of something your grandfather and grandmother tried to stop before it consumed this town. My skin prickled. What was it? The woman hesitated, choosing her words like landmines. Your grandfather James was a police officer. A good one. But he uncovered something ugly buried inside the department. Corruption tied to property seizures, false arrests, and a ring of officers who used the cover of community safety to take what they wanted. My pulse quickened. A rogue group? She shook her head. No. Not rogue. Protected. I felt sick. He and your grandmother gathered evidence, she continued. They planned to go to federal investigators. They used us, the neighbors they trusted, to hide pieces of the truth. My eyes dropped to the metal box. What happened to him? I whispered. Her gaze softened. He disappeared the night before he was supposed to testify. That punched the air out of me. My chest tightened. They said he ran away, she added bitterly. They lied. We all knew they lied. I wiped my shaking hands on my jeans. And my grandmother? Why didn't she tell anyone? She tried. But every time she got close, someone new would watch the house, harass her, follow her. They made her life hell. I thought of Auntie Mae's quiet sadness, her locked sewing room, her trembling hands. They broke her, I whispered. No, the woman said firmly. She resisted. Stitch by stitch, warning after warning, she resisted. I swallowed hard. My dad, they took him. Her face fell. She leaned forward, gripping the arm of her chair. Did they see the box? I nodded. Yes. Did you open it in your house? Yes. Her eyes closed briefly, fear, grief, something darker passing through them. Then, they know everything you know, she said. And they won't stop. Not until they bury this story again. I clutched the box tighter, my heartbeat hammering. What do I do? She stood suddenly and walked to a narrow hallway. You do what your grandmother started. She returned holding a quilt, beautiful, old, stitched with the same geometric symbols Auntie Mae used. Only this one had words sewn into the back. Words that made my blood run cold. If they take one of us, the others rise. The woman handed it to me. This was your grandfather's. His last message. I unfolded it, hands trembling. You're not alone, Emily, she whispered. House #3 never fell. And neither will you. Before I could speak, headlights flashed through the window. Bright. Close. The woman's eyes snapped to the front door. They found you. The house went silent. They found us. The headlights outside grew brighter, cutting through the curtains in harsh stripes. Shadows stretched long across the floor, jagged and unnatural. I hugged the metal box to my chest, pressing it like a shield, while the older woman, House #3's caretaker, moved behind me silently. They won't leave without it, she whispered. They never do. I swallowed hard, adrenaline clawing at my throat. Then what do we do? Her eyes hardened. We fight, but quietly, cleverly, like your grandmother taught you. I stared at her, mind spinning. My grandmother's quiet quilts, stitched with strange patterns. They weren't just warnings. They were instructions, codes, maps, strategies. And now I realized I had to follow them if I wanted my dad alive. A shadow flickered past the front window. Get down, the woman hissed, pressing me into the floor beside the sofa. They've spotted us. I felt my heart hammering in my ears. The intruders circled the house slowly, voices low, methodical. They weren't just looking for someone, they were hunting. One of them tapped lightly on the front door. House. #3. A voice said. Deep. Controlled. Cold. We know she's in there. Come out and no one gets hurt. I gritted my teeth. No one gets hurt? Not my dad. Not my grandmother's legacy. Not me. I looked down at the quilt in my lap. The patterns jumped out now. Zigzags. Diamonds. Arrows. Symbols pointing toward a hidden door in the floorboard near the kitchen. My grandmother had anticipated this. Always one step ahead. This way, whispered the woman, pointing. Follow me. We moved carefully across the floor, staying in shadows. My hands were shaking so hard I thought I might drop the box. Every creak of the old wood sounded like a gunshot in my ears. We reached the hidden panel in the floor. It was small, but perfect, just enough for 2 people in the box. She lifted it, and the smell of damp earth and old stone hit me. The crawl space beyond was narrow, dark, but safe. For now, I lowered myself in, sliding the box beside me. What now? I whispered. She pressed her finger to her lips. We wait. They'll try to flush us out. Don't make a sound. Above us, footsteps. Lightly paced, calculated. They were looking, listening, hunting. I closed my eyes and pictured my grandmother's hands, stitching patterns into quilts, warning generations she'd never meet. This is why she never spoke. The quilts weren't just warnings, they were survival guides. And now, I was learning the hard way. A shadow moved across the floor above, right over the crawl space. The intruder paused, footsteps shifted, then silence. I exhaled slowly. Emily, whispered the woman. You're ready now. You know what you must do. The map, the patterns, the box, they all lead to one thing. Your father and your grandfather's truth. I nodded, clutching the box like it held my own heartbeat. I was ready. Scared? Yes, but ready. And for the first time in decades, I felt my grandmother's courage coursing through me. The intruders wouldn't find us here, not yet. But I knew they would come back. And next time, I wouldn't be hiding. I would meet them head on. The crawl space was dark, cramped, and smelled of old stone and dust, but I didn't care. My hands were shaking too much to even think about being comfortable. The metal box sat beside me, a cold, heavy reminder of everything at stake. The woman from House #3, her name finally introduced itself as Mrs. Whitaker, sat quietly beside me. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. It's time you knew everything. About your grandfather? She whispered. I swallowed hard. I thought I knew him. Dad said he was a cop, a good man, but what really happened? She nodded. He was a good man, a very good man, and that's why they wanted him gone. I shivered. Who wanted him gone? The people who buried the crimes he discovered, she said flatly. Corrupt officers, city officials, and businessmen who used your neighborhood as their playground. They wanted total control, and they didn't want anyone exposing them. I traced my fingers over the metal box. And the box? The quilts? Mrs. Whitaker smiled faintly. Your grandmother Mae stitched warnings into those quilts. Not just for you, but for your family. Each pattern corresponded to a location, an event, or a person. Your grandfather used the quilts to record what he couldn't officially report. He hid evidence there. Documents, maps, proof. Everything the city wanted buried. I swallowed, feeling my chest tighten. So, everything he disappeared for is in here. Yes, she said. Everything. And your grandmother continued the work. She kept the patterns alive so that if someone brave enough came along, they could finish what your grandfather started. My mind raced. Dad. Taken. The quilts. The box. The men hunting us. And now, the legacy of a grandfather I never truly knew. I asked softly, Did he ever leave instructions? Did he know we'd need to find this? Mrs. Whitaker nodded. He left? One thing in writing. When the quilts are read and the box is found, the truth must come to light. Only then can justice have a chance. I glanced at the box. Inside, the folded maps and documents felt heavier than ever. And if the wrong people get it first, then it's all lost, she said. Her voice hardened. They have the power now. They've been covering their tracks for decades. But tonight, you're going to make a choice. Do you act, or do you let history repeat itself? I felt the weight of her words sink in. The fate of my father, my family, the legacy of my grandparents, all of it rested in my hands. I opened the box slowly. The documents inside were fragile, yellowed, handwritten, and stamped with official seals. Maps detailed every house connected to the conspiracy. Lists of names, neighbors, officials, officers revealed a network so wide I felt dizzy just reading it. And then I found the letter. My grandfather's handwriting, shaky but precise. To the one who finds this. You are now the keeper of truth. Do not let fear stop you. If you act with courage, you can undo decades of lies. Trust the quilts. Trust the patterns. They will guide you. I felt tears prick my eyes. For the first time, I understood why Grandma Mae spent so many years sewing quietly, secretly, obsessively. The quilts weren't just warnings, they were guides, instructions, and hope. Mrs. Whitaker whispered, "You know what you have to do next." I nodded, gripping the box tighter. "I have to save my father, and you will," she said, her eyes sharp, unwavering. "The patterns will lead you." I took a deep breath. Outside, the distant sound of the SUV's engine reminded me that time was running out. The men who had taken Dad were still out there. And the truth, the buried legacy of the past, was now mine to fight for. I folded the quilts carefully around the box, letting the weight of history settle on my shoulders. Tonight, I would follow the patterns. Tonight, I would finish what my grandparents started. And nothing, no corrupt officer, no shadowy figure, no decades of lies would stop me. I didn't wait. I couldn't. The metal box was heavy in my arms, wrapped in Grandma Mae's quilt, and every step toward the SUV echoing through the dark night felt like the slow ticking of a bomb. I didn't know what I would find, only that I had to act fast before the men realized I wasn't just a frightened girl hiding in the shadows. House. #3's caretaker, Mrs. Whitaker, handed me a small flashlight. "Follow the map," she whispered. "The quilts lead to him. Trust the patterns." I swallowed hard and nodded. The streets were dark, quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The map from the metal box folded carefully beneath my arm showed the route. Symbols from the quilt lined the way, almost like breadcrumbs. And then I saw it. The black SUV parked near the old warehouse at the edge of town. My father was inside, hands bound, head bowed. 2 men stood guard, laughing softly. I crouched behind a pile of crates. My mind raced. How had Grandma Mae survived all these years? How had she stitched the patterns, left the clues, and prepared for this exact moment? I counted the steps in my head, memorized the guard's movements. When one shifted his weight, I slipped closer. A creak. A whisper. I froze. My heart was in my throat. Then I noticed something. One of the guard's boots caught the black edge of a small puddle, making just enough sound to distract his partner. That was all I needed. I darted forward, keeping low, the quilt-covered box shielding my chest. I reached the back of the SUV. The doors were locked. Panic surged through me, but I remembered the patterns, the instructions hidden in the stitches. A small panel at the side of the truck, its placement mirrored a symbol from the quilt. I pressed the panel. A faint click. The door unlocked. I yanked it open. My father's head lifted, surprised, eyes wide. "Emily?" "Shh," I whispered. "We don't have much time." He struggled against his bonds. I pulled the rope free with shaking hands. "Go," I hissed. "Now." We moved quickly, shadows swallowing us as the 2 guards realized the SUV door had opened. One lunged. I swung the quilt-wrapped box at him, hitting him hard across the chest. He stumbled back, cursing. The second guard reached for me, but my father grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground and swung it with precision learned from years in law enforcement. The man went down with a grunt. We ran fast, silent, hearts hammering. until the warehouse and the SUV were behind us. We stopped in a dark alley, catching our breath. My father hugged me fiercely, whispering over and over, "You saved me! You saved me!" I shook my head, tears running down my cheeks. "No, Dad. Grandma Mae saved us. And so did the quilts. They showed me the way." He looked at the metal box. "Everything's in there?" I nodded. Everything. And for the first time in decades, the weight of the past, the corruption, the disappearances, the lies felt like it could finally be confronted. We had survived, but the story wasn't over. Not yet. The men in the SUV were still out there. The network of corruption was still alive. But we had the evidence, the patterns, and the courage passed down from Grandma Mae. And that was more powerful than fear. I looked at my father. "We're going back," I said, voice steady. "We end this once and for all." He nodded. "Together." And together, we disappeared into the night, following the paths stitched in quilts decades ago, paths that would finally lead the truth into the light. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the streets were quiet, almost expectant, as if the town itself was waiting for justice. My father and I moved carefully, the metal box wrapped in Grandma Mae's quilt in my arms. Every step felt heavy, every shadow a memory, every echo of the past reminding me how close we had come to losing everything. We reached house #3 again, where Mrs. Whitaker had been waiting. She opened the door before we even knocked. "You made it," she said quietly. Her eyes held relief, but also a steely determination. I nodded. "We have him," I said, glancing at my father. "And the evidence." Mrs. Whitaker guided us inside and motioned toward a table. She laid out the quilt patterns beside the maps, documents. "This is it," she said. "Everything your grandmother and grandfather collected. Every corruption, every crime, every person involved." I opened the box carefully, revealing stacks of documents, photographs, and handwritten notes. My father's eyes widened as he scanned them. "All of this," he murmured. "May and James, they were brilliant. They were careful," Mrs. Whitaker said, "and patient. The quilts were the map, the patterns, the warnings, and the box, the proof. Everything needed to expose the network." I spread the quilts over the table, their intricate patterns matching maps, addresses, and symbols. Suddenly, it all made sense. The zigzags, the diamonds, the loops. Each stitch was a guide, each fold a clue. Grandma Mae hadn't just been warning us, she had been planning the day when we could act safely. My father leaned closer, pointing to one document after another. "They thought they could bury the truth forever. But your grandmother? She made sure it couldn't stay hidden." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. She trusted us to finish it. That's why she never spoke. She was stitching history into fabric. Mrs. Whitaker smiled faintly. "And now, you're ready to take it forward, to reveal the truth, to end the silence." I glanced at my father, then back at the quilts. "We will," I said firmly. "We have to." Together, we began organizing everything. The maps, the documents, the photos, preparing to deliver them to the authorities who could be trusted. For the first time in decades, the weight of secrets felt manageable. For the first time, I felt my grandmother's courage flowing through me. As we worked, a small sunbeam broke through the window, illuminating the patterns stitched in the quilt. I traced one line with my finger, imagining Grandma Mae sitting in her sewing room, hands moving deliberately, eyes sharp and determined, stitching warnings no one understood. But now we understood. The quilts had been more than fabric and thread. They were proof. They were guidance. They were hope. And as we packed the evidence for delivery, I whispered softly, almost to myself, "Grandma, we didn't just survive. We finished what you started." My father squeezed my shoulder. "And your mother will be proud," he said. I smiled through tears, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. The past, buried for decades, was finally being brought to light. The corrupt network, once untouchable, would be exposed. And in the quiet of that house #3 morning, surrounded by quilts, documents, and the legacy of generations, I understood the true power of warning, patience, and courage. The quilts weren't just warnings. They were a map to justice. And we had finally followed it all the way home. The end.